Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss how unionists in Northern Ireland, and the DUP in particular, should be paying very careful attention to a particular aspect of what US President Joe Biden discussed in his speech in Belfast earlier this week. If they want to coexist with the Brexit that they campaigned for, it could be absolutely vital. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson praised Biden's speech earlier this week, drew out some of the strands that he particularly approved of, but there was one crucial part of the speech that, behind closed doors at least, should be the main talking point for the DUP and wider unionist movement in Northern Ireland. It was Biden's talk of future American investment. Right now, the various powers within the DUP are at odds about power sharing, with the result that they are still not prepared to reform the Stormont executive. The way this looks from the outside is the DUP currently see advantage in not allowing Stormont to do its work. And I know the DUP aren't always the most logical, but they should consider that there are various benefits to power sharing for them and even getting to work on the protocol. First, it gives them a competitive advantage due to free exports across Europe. Nowhere else has that. I've said this countless times before. What we ended up with may not be the Brexit that they imagined. I don't think it's really the Brexit that very many people imagined, though I've never been completely clear on what Brexit they did imagine exactly. But it is an advantage for them. Businesses in Northern Ireland can export freely to all countries in the EU single market. They can additionally export freely to Britain. Only the protocol, or Windsor Framework, whatever you want to call it, allows this. Nowhere else in the world can do this either. Nowhere else. This gives Northern Ireland a huge competitive advantage in terms of attracting certain types of investment. It's a powerful motivator for international businesses to set up in Northern Ireland in order to access both markets. The only thing stopping them, and this was hinted at in Biden's speech, was political instability. Get Stormont running properly and you unleash a lot of inward investment. The second consideration is that people in Northern Ireland are, on average, poorer than in the Republic of Ireland. An average salary in Ireland of just under £40,000 a year, compared to £34,000 a year in Northern Ireland. If unionists want Northern Ireland to remain in the UK, why are they allowing standard of living arguments to favour reunification? It just doesn't sound strategic. If people in Northern Ireland not only started to see their economy booming, but actually sharing in that boom, well, people tend not to vote for huge constitutional change when things are going well. They only do so when it's going poorly. You know, why would you risk throwing out the baby with the bathwater? Brexit worked in 2016 because people had been brutalised by years of Tory austerity. They were seeing their living standards fall in real time and allowed themselves to be convinced that it was somehow the fault of the EU, not the Tories who had presided over it. But that doesn't matter. The point is, a lot of people voted for Brexit because their living standards had been falling, and it was like, well, this is maybe a way to change the status quo and get things moving in the right direction. Well, what are people in Northern Ireland going to imagine if things aren't going their way, if investment's been strangled? Well, this is all caused by the protocol, you say. Well, how can we get rid of the protocol? I know, let's reunify with Ireland. Biden is dangling an investment boost here. And it's not just words. When Sunak raved about the exciting place Northern Ireland will be to invest because of its unique access to both markets in Europe, something we all had a few years ago, he wasn't wrong. It was just galling to those of us stuck on Clown Island who were going, we used to have this. Why can't we have it? And the protocol, framework, whatever, you know, is vital for Northern Ireland's economy as well. So much production requires movement between different parts of Ireland. I mean, look at the news in Britain this week. A company has had to close because it relies on sending lace to France for dyeing and then bringing it back. And our Tory Brexit has dumped extra duties on them for doing so. So now the company is closing down because it cannot afford it. It relied upon cross-border movement of goods as part of their process, but it cannot afford to do that. It's been around for over 2 centuries. But in their own words, they've been finished off by their own side. The importance of cross-border trade being frictionless as possible. Wanting to end that makes no sense. And the DUP know that as well. I saw an interview with Donaldson early in the week, and I think it was the day after. I think it might have been Thursday. And he said that the protocol undermines Northern Ireland's place in the UK. It's like, it really doesn't. Yes. I know what they're doing. They're looking at the fact that in many ways Northern Ireland aligns with the rest of Ireland away from Britain. Yeah, okay. But on a practical level, it allows for a strong economic basis to remain in this unique position for as long as Britain remains outside of the European single market anyway. But if the DUP tie themselves in knots and do not allow Northern Ireland to gain the benefits that it can from a political move that nobody is willing to go on record as saying they like, including the Conservatives who delivered it, then they risk being seen as the barrier to prosperity, as well as political stability. Because on the flip side, they should consider what happens if they don't engage. See, first of all, if Stormont continues to remain in mothballs, well, apart from anything else, it means that the Irish government start getting involved. Good Friday Agreement and all that. If they want them to keep their noses out of affairs, they need to start running their own affairs, don't they? That means taking their seats. Secondly, if they are seen as the cause of stalled investment in Northern Ireland, unionism as a concept takes a hit, not just the DUP. Irish economy doing well again. This is not the time to turn down the opportunity to let Northern Ireland fall further behind. But the way some in the DUP and in other groups are carrying on is quite baffling. See, they're talking as if Biden was promising this trebling of US investment if political parties accepted the framework. They took it as political interference. They took it as Biden saying, look, I can arrange for American investment here to treble if you behave yourselves. Biden wasn't saying that. He wasn't offering investment. He wasn't threatening to block investment. He was explaining what the investors want, and the investors want stability. He was just explaining that there are US investors who want to do business in Northern Ireland, but they want to know that the trading conditions are settled. We can see the truth of this in investment figures for the whole of the UK in the period leading up to and after the 2016 Brexit referendum. Investment in the UK dropped and never recovered. We hadn't left the EU at that point. It was still years away. But investment decisions are for years away. They're for 5, 10 or more years in the future. The UK had said that it intended to raise huge trade barriers with its most important market. And so investment dropped off. Because that's not what investors want to hear. The same motivation exists for investors looking at Northern Ireland, but being a bit wary. Because they're thinking, well, there's a good opportunity here. But the political forces in Northern Ireland aren't going ahead with it. There's got this opportunity due to that free access to both British and European markets, but uncertainty because a major political force is opposing this opportunity. So until there's political agreement, investors can't be sure what looks like advantageous trading conditions will still be in place in a few years' time. What if they do derail the whole thing? The figures in the unionist movement who can understand this would do better to start explaining it more clearly. Preferably they will persuade their more uncompromising colleagues, but if that won't work, then they should start explaining it to the people and attempt to cut them off from any significant support, because the current direction they are taking is powerfully against their own interests, as well as the interests of people in Northern Ireland. The one part of the UK that got a special deal out of Brexit, and the very people who campaigned in favour of Brexit there, are basically saying they don't even bloody well want it. We want to suffer the negative impacts of Brexit the same as everyone else. This is mindless. Basically, they are wishing Northern Ireland to be broken so that nationalists can say, well, if Northern Ireland doesn't work in the UK, maybe it will work in a united Ireland. That is the inevitable trajectory of groups like the DUP. Do they ever think about that? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.